Hey everyone, this is Josh Vision. I'm here to give my season 1, episode 2 review of Robin Hood. So, in my previous episode review, we left off with Robin and Will Scarlet and Much and company basically being trapped between a rock and a hard place by another group in the Sherwood Forest led by their leader, John, aka Little John. So, in episode 2, we see Robin and his friends basically being robbed of their weapons and their food, and they're tied to a tree, essentially, and left there while John and his group make their way deeper into the forest. So Robin's able to, and his friends are able to untie themselves, get themselves out of this predicament, and they decide to teach John a lesson in which they catch up to John and his friends, and they have them tied up. And basically, while they're tied up, Robin chastises them for basically being hypocrites. With everything that sheriff's doing, robbing from the poor, and they know what it's like, being poor, and they're in the woods robbing from other people who they consider to be poor. That's kind of hypocritical. But while Robin's giving his little rant, turns out that John has more friends that he let on, and they have Robin and his friends once again, kind of like earlier in the episode, traveling a rock in a hard place with arrows pointed, all around them, essentially. Also in this episode, we have the sheriff and Gaius of Gibbon basically go to Locksley, Robin's hometown, his manor, etc., and the people that live there, the peasants, etc. He basically threatens to remove every male and female's tongue for the next hour, at least one male's or one peasant's tongue every hour that they don't tell him where Robin, his friends are actually. So I believe Robin and his friends are told this by John and his men, and they're basically captured by John because of the reward they would get for selling out Robin and his friends. So basically, once John and Robin and company make their way towards the village, they notice that John's wife is actually the next victim on the sheriff's list to get her tongue removed. So Will Scarlet, I believe, promises John that if he unties him, he can save his wife. But before that even happens, I believe Robin gives himself up. So when Robin gets himself up, there's no point of the sheriff removing tongues anymore, and the group sort of heads back towards the Sherwood Forest undetected. So Much isn't really having this. He's really pissed off the fact that no one has come up with a plan at least to save Robin, and everyone's kind of. I feel as though it's like they would save Robin, but they're kind of like, well, he was the reason behind this, behind the whole tongue removal thing, and they much rather have saved their skins, than to have their tongues removed, etc. So Much decides to go back into, town, essentially out of the forest, to try to figure out a way to save Robin. And he decides on the way to go visit the old sheriff and his daughter. So basically, the old sheriff and his daughter kind of have the same mentality as John, Will Scarlet, and Alan Nadale and everyone else, in which, well, Robin put himself in this position, and Robin's the one that gave himself up. And it's unfortunate, but it's the way it is. So Much is like, listen, this is a bunch of crap. Robin's a good person. And I think he mentioned to Marion that during the 5 years they were away in Palestine fighting the Crusades, that Robin would speak out her name while he was having bad dreams, essentially, which is equivalent of PTSD, but obviously back then they didn't know what it was. So that struck a chord with Marion. So we get a scene with Robin basically in jail, and there's he talks to the sheriff, and it connects to the last scene he's gonna have with the sheriff near the end of the episode, in which the sheriff talks about Robin's past, and then he also talks about how he feels though Robin doesn't have the gall to kill him, saying basically that all Robin has to do is kill the sheriff, and all the problems of the peasants and everyone else in the towns, whatever, Nonham, Locksley, etc., will be solved. And he just cares why Robin, doesn't want to kill him. And I believe Robin said he doesn't really care if he dies. I think he mentioned something about him being a symbol, essentially, for good, etc., etc. But, sheriff's kind of arrogant, like usual. He leaves. He does a joke about how dead men can't talk or they're irrelevant once they're dead. We have Marion speaking with Robert, and it's Robin, and it basically connects towards a little bit of what was said in the previous episode, but more in depth about how she feels Robin always thinks about himself. He's vain and arrogant despite the goodness that he has, and that's what always screws him, in that he was selfish for going off to the Crusades to begin with, not thinking about how anyone else would feel about that. But Robin was steadfast, in his assertion that he had to do what he had to do, and that he's going to figure out a way on how to get out of this predicament, basically, one way or the other. And while they're talking, Much comes, and him and Alan Adale and John and company are trying to basically find a way to get back into town and rescue Robin. So they're all able to get, out, basically. But Robin says, I need y'all to hold these soldiers off for another 5 minutes. I got to speak to someone. So he speaks to the sheriff again, and he basically shoots at least 4 or 5 shots at the sheriff, which he could have killed him, but he didn't, which connects basically to, like I said before, with the scene in the jail in which the sheriff's like, you know what? You can't kill me. Why don't you kill me? All you have to do is just finish me off, and all your problems will be solved. But it seems as though, like, Robin is kind of like, and also it's like the sheriff noticed, it seemed like Robin has changed a lot from his time in the Crusades. So the sheriff thinks that Robin got soft. But Robert nicks him really badly with his arrows, and Robin shoots an arrow at, I believe, one of the sheriff's guards / soldiers, but he hits him like in the part of the body which is not really fatal. So Robin basically has the sheriff at arrow point, literally, as he sort of forces the sheriff to say a few things to the soldiers, which allows Robin and his friends to leave, I believe. So that's essentially how the episode ended. I think I mentioned before the whole thing with John and his wife. Before I end this review, I want this to be known, the fact that John actually did meet the son, which I don't think he knew about. I think the kid's probably 6 or 8, something along those lines. He's basically around the same age as how long it's been since John seen his wife, or at least lived with his wife. The kid's probably around 8 or something like that. And John has a brief conversation with the child, but he doesn't know that John's actually his father. So the episode ends with the group which John's a part of, I believe, having people who they care about, Robin helping them, give them food. I believe Robin helped John's family get food. I believe Robin and John left ham or something, pork or beef, hanging on John's wife and son's door. I believe that there was another part of John's group, one of his men, which Robin left his mother a certain amount of money. And basically that's what they did towards the end of the episode. The sheriff is he's pissed at Robin. That's nothing new. So is Gaius. But that's about it. If I missed anything, write some comments down below in the comment section, obviously. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Adios.